fucking hard, son. I swear to God, it's like so simple, but it's so strong. It's just wild. Yeah. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, fuck your bitch. Met her in my palace through the tunnels where she plummeted. Poor boy, rich soul, pulled pork drip sauce. Tiptoeing in my crock, cheetah print slip-ons. Roped up velvet king, rhymes pure. Fresh up off the boat like they shipped out from Medellin. Tabernacle, telepathy, secret weaponry. Black stallion galloping through fields of your wettest dreams. Big booty Bethany's, searching for Bill Gates. Bills paid, never built the blocks from the ill ways. Keep points sharper than the dagger held by Arya. Karma keeps you company and keeps me where the stars hung. Untouched and unscathed, nunchucks and Kango rim. She chew me like some boobaloo and swallowed up my baby fish. Booty tank pimping, try for potency, I plead the fifth. The last of the Mohicans still walking with a gangster limb.
Well, I said, hey, your man is bona fide.
See, you a righteous pimp.
Shit, real pimpin' live here. Ain't he go? That's how we go. Like
Taking jagged steps like a cold power cold train. Freshest out the fire, we ain't talking about them old flames. We know things, get them bitches kissing gold rings. My soul's claimed by figures with no names, it's okay. I never hide behind the mask, I'm just posted on the app, just waiting for time to pass. Cause bad's back to back, that's through the looking glass. I dip into my stash, pack a bowl that's full of hash. Listen, I only got the time for precision, so stay out of my vision if you ain't making decisions. I'm living on top of this cloud, I roll around like Gohan. Now I'm just saying I'm so strong, you're so wrong. And y'all can't match with these giants in the fire we supplying. From the highlands to the islands, the sirens, they calling your name into the rocky shore. Walking to the store, what's your hands inside your pockets for?
Yo, we're live. Welcome everybody.
Good, what's good?
How's everybody doing today? We're all here, I hope.
It's been a week.
Yep. It's been a long week.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hope everybody's doing okay at home. Hope the quarantine's going well. We're just getting a couple things finishing off. I am glad everybody's here again. We got a lot of cool shit to talk about. First things first, we're going to talk about what's going on in Lebanon and Beirut. We're going to do an update. We have a little video for you. Jacan, if you want to take that over.
Yeah, the video is actually from a reporter called Eian, works for Gray Zone News. It's kind of an update on what caused, not just what caused this explosion to happen, but I guess the systems that allowed it to happen in the first place. Video's like 5 minutes or so we'll go ahead and play some and then talk about it after.
Welcome to Pushback. I'm Aaron Mate. The massive explosion in Beirut has left a country that was already in crisis facing a new calamity. Joining me from Beirut is Rania Masri, a lecturer and activist. Rania, thank you for joining. First, let me just ask you to talk about how you're doing and what you're seeing around you.
It's hard. Well, first, thank you, Aaron, for this time. It's really hard for me to say I'm fine. I'm safe, and folks that I know are also safe, but none of us are really fine. We're either in shock or feeling a great deal of outrage over this catastrophe that was man-made. It's not a hurricane that has hit us. It's not a natural earthquake, nor is it an act of war committed by an enemy. It is specifically caused by our own criminal negligence, and by I mean our leaders here in the country. So that's how we're doing. As for the state of the city or where I was during the blast, I mean, I was home. My home is around 5 kilometers away from the epicenter of the explosion. It felt first like an earthquake, and then a minute or two later, the sonic boom hit, and the windows just exploded open. They didn't shatter, but just all the doors in the apartment, the windows, they just burst open. And I happen to be extremely fortunate. Other buildings around me, their glass shattered. Other buildings, a few neighborhoods down, completely fell apart. we have around 25% of the capital has been decimated. 300,000 people have been rendered homeless. That's the U.S. equivalent of around 14 million Americans.
300,000.
5,000 wounded, approximately 135 killed that we know of so far, and that is only, the human loss. So yes, all of this caused by one massive explosion of 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate.
You mentioned political corruption and incompetence being a cause of this. Can you talk more about what you see as or who you see as the major culprits here?
Well, let's backtrack so that people know actually what happened. So in September 2013, there was a ship that arrived at the Lebanese port, and it was one of many ships where the owner decides to dock the ship and not pay for his workers and leaves the ship. And so then workers are held hostage, and this happens, and unfortunately all too often by lots of large ships. So in this case, lawyers came and they were able to release the workers, but the package of what was on the ship remained there. So since 2013, so that's more than 6 years, we've had 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate just sitting in a warehouse on the port in improper storage, in very humid storage with lights, with electricity all around it. Successive individuals knew of the danger of this
More than
and
that, my garage.
did insufficient actions to protect the city.
Kinda
And we
seems
are
like this is
talking
bound to
not just
happen.
about the managers of
Yeah.
customs, but the court officials that knew, and the ministers that are responsible for what is happening on the port, both the Minister of Trade, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Social Work, and so on and so forth. For
We can
6
go ahead and pause it there
years,
for right now.
2,750 tons.
Yeah, she keeps going on. She goes on to talk more about how it's also other countries that are responsible for it too, because all those leaders she's talking about obviously, have foreign connection. Like the finance leader of Lebanon obviously has connections to, President Macron, etc.
Mhm.
And they knew about this. So, and they knew obviously it's a danger. And something I have personally looked up is that most of the largest accidental explosions or non-nuclear explosions are all ammonium nitrate.
Really?
Yeah, including one here that happened in Texas in the 1940s, and it's supposed to be our worst industrial disaster ever. Like it blew up a whole port in the Gulf back in the 40s.
God damn.
But yeah, I guess that's gonna be kind of our theme for the night, among other things, is just general negligence has caused us, so many problems that we don't need to have, from climate problems to stuff like this, like literal bombs going off in our capital cities.
Yeah.
From stuff we've known, that explodes and it's held in a building with all these electric lights and stuff. Yeah, just they knew it was gonna happen. It's ridiculous.
And so, you want to just continue with current events? We want to get into
we just wanted to touch on that because
yeah,
obviously sad, but
and we also just talked about it last podcast.
Yeah.
I thought
So
it was
gotta get
important to keep everybody updated
recently.
So next, we're gonna talk about, as probably everybody heard, Kamala Harris is now on the Biden ticket for the Vice President of the United States, which is pretty hilarious. Seeing that after all of these police protests that we decided to make a cop VP, which is fucking hilarious. So as you can see on the screen here, we have a little article from The Hill, and it also has the latest attack ad from the Trump campaign.
Which you could see coming from a mile away.
Like there's so much juice and sauce in attacking specifically the Biden Harris ticket. Yeah,
I mean, as the video is going to point out, they really are the perfect duo. You can play the video.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get the video started.
Harris ran for president by rushing to the radical left, embracing Bernie's plan for socialized medicine, calling for trillions in new taxes, attacking Joe Biden for racist policies. Voters rejected Harris. They smartly spotted a phony. But not Joe Biden. He's not that smart. Biden calls himself a transition candidate. He is handing over the reins to Kamala while they jointly embrace the radical left. Slow Joe and phony Kamala. Perfect together. Wrong for America.
I can't stress this enough. I wish for no other thing than for Kamala to be some deep agent of the left. Like,
yeah, if only.
all the fiber right being wishes that all of these like Republican talking points were true. Like if Obama was actually like this Islamist Marxist fucking person that they always describe him as, like.
Oh yeah, if only it was that. That'd be amazing.
We'd be so much better off.
It's interesting though, because I mean, we all definitely saw the Kamala pick coming. Like a long time ago, we thought, okay, that's probably the top option.
Oh yeah,
but now it's even crazier to think, because now the last 2 months have just been police brutality protests, and now Joe Biden's going to pick someone that's like synonymously known amongst everyone as the cop.
Yeah, literally, like one of her nicknames is Cop Mala. Like,
yeah. So I mean, now it's like one of the worst picks. It was then too, obviously bad, but given the current moment, it's like one of the worst picks you could imagine.
Yeah, like the person who quoted themselves as like top cop in the biggest state, kind of like who laughed about fucking smoking weed in high school after like arresting so many people for weed charges. Like,
I mean, the one benefit Biden does get is he gets the tenacity of K-Hive behind him, because
the K-Hive is strong.
Yeah, so at least Biden has some kind of online, military now.
Yeah. Before they were just.
Have you seen all those articles coming out where they're like, Kamala has this online army?
Yeah, like just completely flipping the narrative. Like before, Bernie bros, so bad. They're evil and they just attack, bully people. But
online, yeah.
As soon as we get this insane like army of fucking Kamala Harris supporters, you're like, let's go.
Yeah, which shows it had nothing to do. It's all the ideology. They're fine with neolibs bullying people.
It's all politics.
Deal. Yeah,
playing for their team, not understanding how to excite their base, not understanding the concept of power.
Yeah, and Trump is obviously going to capitalize on this further with some, I'm sure, some amazing ads. Yeah.
The MAGA chuds are strong on the internet.
I mean, from Biden, it's such a weak pick, too, because, like, not that he had it in the bag, but you can definitely see him lose. Like, what states does he lock in because of this,
Exactly.
What does he gain?
There's no battleground states where, like, the Biden-Harris ticket is strategic at all.
Yeah,
he's gonna get his for sure blue states like California, shit like that.
Yeah, now with Kamala, he's won the crazy battleground state of California.
Yeah, Delaware, fucking.
Let's jump on Trump though, because Trump's been fucking executing people in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah, this is actually a pretty crazy segment here. So if you want to pull the article up.
This was a bit ago, but let's bring it up. Go ahead.
Not only is it current, but it's just the death penalty in itself is very important.
Yeah, blood in the water. Disregarding the virus and victims' families, Trump rushes to execute as many people as possible. It was getting close to midnight at the Ford dealership on Route 41 in Terre Haute, Indiana, and there was no word yet on the execution. Half a dozen people sat hunched over their cell phones next to a hulking gray pickup truck, awash in the fluorescent lights flooding the lot. It was Monday night, July 13th, and Daniel Lewis Lee scheduled to die at 4 p.m. It would be the first federal execution in 17 years, the last time the U.S. government restarted executions after a long pause, last killing Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh in a newly constructed death chamber in 2001. Throngs of protesters and national press overwhelmed the city of 60,000. But this was a significantly smaller event, not to mention also, COVID's going on. Some 20 protesters had gathered at the intersection in front of the dealership early that day. The street that cuts across Route 41 Spring Hill Drive leads straight to the entrance of USP Terre Haute, a sprawling supermax prison across from a Dollar General. Fitting. That's as American as it gets. The demonstration included a contingent of Catholic nuns, Sisters of Providence from the nearby St. Mary of the Woods congregation. They held signs prompting, honking, waves, and the occasional expletive from passing cars. "What about the victims?" one woman yelled. But nearly 8 hours later, the intersection was quiet. Most of the protesters had gone home. Around 11 p.m., the son of the owner stopped by the lot. He'd gotten a call about vandals, which proved unfounded. "The dealership people have been really cool," said Abe Bonowitz of Death Penalty Action, as the man drove off. "The nuns buy their cars here," he added. We'll skip further down to around 11:40 p.m. if we can get to there. Around 11:40 p.m., news finally reached the parking lot. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit had ruled against the Trump administration, leaving the preliminary injunction in place. The court set an expedited briefing scheduled to resolve questions over the execution protocol toward the end of the month. It appeared that all 3 executions would remain on hold. By midnight, Bonowitz had posted a celebratory video on Facebook and started driving back home. But at 2 a.m., an unexpected ruling came from the Supreme Court. In a 5-4 decision, the justice vacated the stay. "Please make your way back to the media center." A Bureau of Prison staffer texted a reporter with the Indianapolis Star who was at a motel near the prison. "We will be resuming the execution at approximately 4 a.m. As the sun came up over the prison, lawyers on both sides were still fighting over Lee's life. In a small, cramped room, the media witnesses sat for hours in plastic chairs, facing 2 windows covered with shades. We could hear birds chirping outside and occasionally muffled bits of conversations from other rooms in the building, built specifically to carry out executions. At 7:46 a.m., the shades finally opened, revealing Lee on the gurney, lying under a blue sheet. Pretty disgusting that all these people were out there protesting, and in between all these appeals happening and them leaving the protest site, the Supreme Court comes back, vacates everything, and they're like, "Let's do it. Let's go. Let's execute people. Let's spend money on executing people." Right now, amidst a pandemic, too, which is absolutely insane to spend money on killing people.
Yeah.
We actually have another article to bring up that Ian wants to talk about on that.
Yeah. So I thought this was really important. It's a little old, but the statistic still holds true. From the National Academy of Science. So there is a 4% chance that the person on the death penalty or the death row inmates are innocent. And I believe the actual execution rate is around 1%. So 1% of the time, that's 1 out of 100 people getting executed, is the wrong person, completely innocent. And I think that on its own is just enough to completely get rid of the death penalty. Not only to have 4 out of 100 people be on death row awaiting their death, sitting there day in and day out, night after night, contemplating how they're going to die soon.
And running up way more money than
exactly
a normal prison.
Exactly. Yeah. Not only that, but 1% of the time, somebody is going to die that is completely innocent. And I think that is batshit crazy, should absolutely be ended as soon as possible. All 50 states federally. Fuck that states' rights shit. We need to completely get rid of the death penalty. It's disgusting. It's barbaric. And it leads to 1 out of 100 people on death row dying. Every time somebody it's
look what they're using that privilege for right now is, Trump, one of the worst, an awful president, one of the worst we've had, is out there just executing people when we need money for all kinds of stuff, PPE, other masks,
tests,
financial aid, tests. Yeah, but instead we're executing people.
We can use that money for unemployment instead of fucking taking it from FEMA during a hurricane season.
Oh yeah.
Like there's so much that money could go to that we're just wasting it on, and on executions, on killing people. And 1% of the time, that person is innocent. That person has done nothing wrong, and we don't hear anything about it. Nobody ever hears anything about it. And it's really disgusting. And keeping on the topic of cops, I think we should transition into something that recently, very recently, just happened. The video that we all saw on Twitter in Santa Clarita, Santa Clarita, where young men were being attacked by a homeless person.
Shout out to Caesar, by the way, for sending me this.
Shout out Caesar. they got a call from a witness saying that these young men were being attacked by like a homeless man, and police arrived on scene and proceeded to point their weapons immediately at the people that were being attacked. Of course, black and brown children, very cop-like. So let's go ahead and get started in the video, and then we can talk about it after. It's very short.
Guys, it's not
Hey, get away from me.
It's the other guy. It's the other guy. It's the other guy. Put your guns down. They're kids. They weren't kids. Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. Guys, do not. Put your hands up. Put your hands up.
Yo, they got their friend.
Put your hands up. Okay, shh. I'm the manager here at Buffalo Wild Wings. They don't care because they black. They don't care because they black. They don't care because they black.
And that was going to help it, yeah. I'm the manager at Buffalo Wild
I'm
Wings.
the one that called you. It was
Well, they
not
got 3
them.
guns on the day.
Yeah, like listen.
Sir, can I please?
I'm the one that called you. It's not them.
Yeah.
Gundo.
Yeah, not changing their attitude at all. That's what, five cops there?
We can tell you, there's no reason. They're kids, bro. Back up. Hey, they're just kids. Guys, back up.
We're not doing nothing. We're right here. We're not doing nothing. We're right here. We're right here. They didn't even do nothing.
Back up.
You need to let them go.
Hey,
That guy is
back
fucking
up.
away with a knife.
I understand.
Bullshit, man. This is bullshit. This is bullshit. They didn't even do nothing. They didn't even do nothing.
That guy was drinking alcohol.
They don't care because they black. They don't give a fuck. They don't care because they black. Because they black. They don't care. Because they black. That's why. Yeah, they don't care because they black. They don't care because they black.
You gotta love, they're
That's
drinking alcohol as an
bullshit.
excuse
They
to
didn't
pull
kids ain't do
guns
nothing at
out.
all.
Yeah.
Because they
Anything that's
fucking
even
black.
less of a
That's
reason to
why.
have your gun
Because
out.
they black.
Because they're intoxicated.
Because they
possibly.
black.
Yeah, they might,
React differently than they normally would if sober.
This is
Exactly.
some bullshit.
It's completely unnecessary for them to have their guns trained.
Yeah, even the people that are around.
For this situation.
Yeah, nobody wants to.
One of the first things that was said to the police was, "I called. It's not them." And they still,
Right.
They don't care.
And not even just this situation, but any situation. It's just, why have your
With a
guns
knife. With a knife. Some bullshit, man.
They act like they
so-
just found America's Most Wanted.
Yeah.
yeah, I know.
Yeah, right.
That guy comes out of his fucking car, AR-15 drawed out, aimed down sight, just ready to blast at these guys
So-
with their hands up, facing like back at them.
Were you gonna say, Michael?
Was it said that they were there because they were drinking like publicly, like out and about, or
That was at least
Well-
the police officer's excuse when they're there.
yeah? Because I heard that, but that still gives no reason to be drawing weapons on these people.
Yeah.
Like, there's
No, not at all.
And especially when told, "I'm the one who called. It is not them. Put your guns away. There's no reason to have your guns out." And they're still just in this almost militant stance, guns ready, on kids, dude.
right.
And kudos
And
to all
even
the
the guy with the
bystanders.
AR.
'Cause
Yeah.
everyone except for the cops in that video handled it to the T. Like, they did as good as they could.
Oh yeah. It's such a stressful situation.
Yeah, seriously.
Having just armed fucking pigs, just guns out, ready to blast you, ready to light up the whole scene, and then just say, "Oh, my life felt threatened. I had to do it."
Yeah, even with that guy with the giant like AR hiding behind the door. As
Yeah, he's
if they
behind the
had
door.
weapons
Yeah,
and,
like as if they're
taking
gonna fire
cover
it
like
back.
military style.
It's
Yeah.
crazy. It's ridiculous.
and all presumably off of a public, drinking call, which let's pull up our next article, has to do with that. It was a recent Jacobin article talking about, giving us our rightful freedom to drink in public like every other fucking country does, instead of treating us like children where we're not allowed to drink.
Right.
Let me bring up on my screen the article real quick. So socialists fought for your right. This is going to talk about the socialist angle first. To understand why our public drinking laws are so repressive, we have to go back to the American movement to ban booze. From its origins, the Prohibition movement was animated by a puritanical spirit. The late 19th century saw temperance activists, many motivated by strict religious codes, push for total abstinence regarding consumption of alcohol, considering it a personal sin. Religious revivalists of the time saw the movement as an opening to secure a level of political legitimacy. As Jane Monroe writes in Hellfire Nation, Prohibition offered them their one link to national authority, the one public commitment to resisting moral decay. That attitude percolated up into legal rulings, such as the 1887 Supreme Court decision in Mugler versus Kansas, that claimed public morals may be endangered by the general use of intoxicating drinks, and that the idleness, disorder, pauperism, and crime existing in the country are, in some degree, traceable to this evil. And that's a mindset that even post-prohibition has not left the conservative mindset too.
Of course not.
Because there's this immediate association with public drinking, or even with people that aren't public drinking, just homeless or those out in the streets. That sort of poverty and public drinking are linked as.
Mm-hmm. One of the first examples people like that give when you say public drinking, they're like, "Oh, you mean those cracked out homeless people that are fucking pounding alcohol, fucking passed out outside of a fucking 99-cent store?" It's like,
if we could scroll down to the paragraph that says in 1932. What can you finish that thought? I'm sorry, I didn't mean.
Oh yeah, it's just ridiculous to me that like when people see things like that, like people out on the street passed out, reeking of alcohol and stuff, they don't think, how did this person get here? How can we as a society help this person? It's look at this passed out bum, look at this drunk fucking idiot, etc., etc. There's no empathy and sympathy for these people.
Right.
And that was as far as I was going to go with it. But yeah, we can get back into the article.
Yes, going back, in 1932, the Socialist Party voted 3-1 to add to its official platform a plank reading, repeal the 18th Amendment, and take over the liquor industry under government ownership and control. The following year's repeal was a major stride toward expanding personal freedom and curtailing the criminalization of alcohol. By the time Duncan and his fellow Milwaukee Socialists successfully overturned prohibition in Wisconsin, support for the liquor moratorium was already diminishing among American voters. Yet even after the repeal in 1933, individual states were still allowed to ban or restrict alcohol sales and use, which led to dry counties where booze is prohibited, many of which still exist today. Ian, you were in Texas. There's still quite a few there.
Plenty of dry counties.
Along with a bevy of other laws designed to limit alcohol use, as famous, no public intoxication. Before we get into this next piece of the article, the reason I originally chose this article to bring up, though, is I guess online there was a lot of people talking about this article as something that only white liberals or this white
only
frat boys, social boys,
the frat boy mentality are the only ones that are going to benefit from this kind of thing.
Right. We just want it because we want to drink in public and have our do our thing. Be sock boys.
It's just that bullshit. It's just that bullshit woke politics.
Right.
It's nobody subscribed to. That is mistakenly by the right seen as the majority of leftist thought. When in reality, most of us just shit on those fucking fake.
Well, and the ridiculous part about it is it's other generally white liberals telling other white liberals that
you only want this because you're a white liberal.
Right. And it's but we're both failing to realize that these laws, have these draconian laws where the police are allowed to arrest people for just having a drink in public. They're
affecting minority communities.
Exactly.
So you're here focused on a small subsect of those who'd be drinking in public, the white frat boys, and not focusing on all the black and brown people that are being arrested for shit like this when they're just trying to enjoy their life. They're not hurting anybody else. They're just having a drink in public and just doing what they want in their own life that only affects them, and nobody should be able to say oh, you can't do that.
Yeah, but we just need to be diligent on staying away from these, I guess, kind of woke arguments that always stick to the policy, and just keep in mind who do these things affect too? Not just who's talking about it, but who do these things affect?
When you really break it down.
Yeah, as it will here. I'll read from punishing the poor for having a brew. The current regime of public drinking laws has led to a system of enforcement that disproportionately punishes Americans based around racial and economic lines. As Nikki Ganong, author of The Field Guide to Drinking in America, recently told Eater of Open Container Regulations, it's another racist law used almost universally against the poor. It's usually an excuse for police to stop and investigate. As the New York Times reports in 2011, New York City police issued 124,498 summonses for drinking in public, far more than for any other violation. Unsurprisingly, in 1 month in Brooklyn, 85% of summons were issued to blacks and Latinos, while 4% were issued to whites, which I guarantee you, of that demographic, there's way more white people being publicly intoxicated than 4%.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like we said, we got to reject this idea that just because a certain group of people are talking about it doesn't mean it's affecting a whole. Yeah, these laws are obviously used to shit on poor minority communities.
You don't want to. That number was talking about underage white people.
Yeah.
And when you see stuff like this, you don't want to necessarily focus on what they're focusing on. When you see these woke people bringing up this frat boy bullshit, you don't want to sit there and be like, oh, yeah, frat boys are annoying, so therefore I don't support this, without doing any deeper thought, any deep dive.
Who do these laws affect, and who do they give power to?
Exactly.
And yeah, we need to be allowed to drink like everyone else in the world, like we're fucking adults, because it's ridiculous at this point.
And it's kind of just hilarious how we're treated like children in this country, when like other countries, like if you look at Germany, like at 16 you can buy beer and wine, I believe, and you can also just drink with drink.
And you can drink publicly too.
Exactly, drink publicly.
Right,
when you turn 18, you can now buy hard alcohol, etc., and that's it. But at 16 in Germany, like at 16, you're considered an adult. You're considered able to make your own decisions about what you want to put in your body.
And you're not going to get arrested for having a beer in public.
Exactly.
Because it's ridiculous. But on the topic of children, let's talk about dead Iraqi children with some of these paintings by George Bush.
Nice transition, dude.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if anybody keeps up with Mr. Bush, but he.
I know I do.
Yeah, post presidency, he decided to become an artist, and so recently he announced that he's putting out a book of immigrants, of his own like self portraits and stuff of immigrants, as this powerful message to how far we've come. But I think it's really funny. One thing we leave out when talking about, or not we, but this whole section,
the main narrative.
This whole section of like liberals that kind of have had their brain completely rotted out from their fucking skulls, that have come back to this weird point of accepting and missing George Bush. Like, that's kind of insane to me. But a big thing that they miss here is George Bush created ICE, that thing that everybody hates. Yeah, George Bush made that, as now scoring all these woke points with liberals for doing paintings of immigrants, which in his presidency, in his terms, completely shit on by creating ICE. And as you as seen since its creation, has done nothing but terrible things to the immigrants. You've had actual
court crazy power to just deport people.
Yeah, and you've had literal court cases where they've been caught doing like legitimate slavery with undocumented people.
Actual indentured servitude. Yeah.
Yeah, and
isolating people with schizophrenia who commit suicide in their facilities. Yeah, and all kinds of crazy shit.
And it's just somehow people have completely forgotten about all of that, and they're just like, oh yes, George Bush. Wow, I miss him. Not that I agree with him on everything politically, but
he's cordial. He's polite.
He was such a real leader. He was that. He was my daddy, and I'd like. It's like
he really led us into multiple wars.
Yeah, but he didn't tweet mean things when he took us into wars. He was a real president. He wore his suit right.
Yeah.
He wasn't an orange Cheeto.
Do you have the picture of Bush with like the like black child and the guy? Is that down this one? Yeah. It's just the pandering is amazing.
You have this just like diverse group here, and then I mean, it's really funny. Look at the fucking kid. He looks so pissed off to be here.
And his Bush's wife looks like she's gonna fucking string him up too.
Yeah,
like, she's trying to take him out.
He's like, why next to this fucking war criminal? Fuck.
Yeah, they told me I get McDonald's if I take a picture.
Yeah, my dad said he'd take me to McDonald's if I stood next to this fucking loser.
Yeah.
So pretty much that was everything we were gonna talk about in this first segment here. We're gonna take into a short break so we can get everything set up for the next one.
Yeah, we got a pretty long video coming up and a lot on the climate. So
the song we're taking you into the break to is by a band called No Silence. The song is called Closer. Go check them out on SoundCloud, No Silence. believe their Instagram is No Silence TV. So yeah, we're gonna take us into a break. Cameras off, song playing, and we'll see you guys in a couple of minutes. Hello. Everybody ready? We back?
Howdy.
We're back.
Be back.
Okay. We'll give everybody a second to get back. They're taking a break. Alrighty.
Shout out to Woodbridge.
Shout out Water.
I got dirt on the Bowie shoes. Ah! Oh man. We got Carlos with us? Carlos, you there?
No?
You lost me. I'll be here in a second, boys. Maybe we'll just wait everyone to get here.
My bad.
You're good.
It's all good.
That's
I took it in a little early.
Yeah, it was a short song.
I put the song on repeat, so.
Oh,
Double. We're gonna have you, Carlos, actually take us into the next segment whenever you're ready.
Yeah.
All right.
Maybe like a little intro into why we're bringing it up, and then.
I guess probably the biggest reason is because, with the whole coronavirus pandemic, you see the massive shift of, everyone wants to get back to work. Everyone needs to get back to work because everyone needs money. But, the biggest problem is, a lot of these places aren't safe for anyone to be going in.
Yeah.
And there's pretty much, no effort made. And, I've been following Richard Wolff for a long time, and I think, especially during this pandemic, the message of what he's pushing for has never been more important till now.
Definitely.
So,
if you're not familiar with Richard Wolff, you should definitely check him out.
Yes, please.
He has most of his work on YouTube.
The channel you can find him on is Democracy at Work.
Yeah.
I'd really recommend checking him out. It will really open your eyes to like a lot of things that maybe you didn't put too much thought in, not only economically but socially as well. And
he just puts it so succinctly too.
Yeah, he doesn't use all this big academic talk. He'll explain.
He doesn't have to. Yeah.
No, yeah, he's done this long enough that he can tell you it in the layman and you'll understand, and it will resonate with you.
We'll also be sure to put his link in the replay on YouTube when that gets
Make sure you check out the YouTube. Everything's on our Twitter. Good plug, by the way.
I always make sure to put all the links up on YouTube, so it'll definitely be there.
Thank you. Shout out to our producers.
Please.
Let's go. Let's play the video. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Get into it.
Forgotten. All right, let me turn then to the other part of your question. What could be done that isn't a repeat or learning from history, doing something new? And here let me focus on one suggestion. The conversion, or the creation would be a better way to put it, the creation of a different sector of our economy, not organized as a private capitalist enterprise, with an owner or a board of directors at the top, a tiny minority, telling the vast majority, the employees, what to do, how to do it, where to do it, what technology to use, and then owning whatever these workers produce as fast as they produce it. That's what employers do. Here's an alternative that I've spoken about before. Worker co-ops, the democratization of an enterprise, so that everybody who works there, one person, one vote, makes the decisions democratically. What are we going to produce? How are we going to go about it? What technology are we going to use? Where are we going to do the production? And what are we all going to do with the labor, the output of our work, the collective product, good or service that we in this enterprise produce? Okay, why am I in favor of that, and how could we do it now? Well, here's the first thing. We should use a law as a model, passed in Italy in 1985, called the Marcora Law. And here's what it does. If you become unemployed in Italy, and by the way, this is still on the books in Italy, so it's been now since 1985, a good 35 years. If you become unemployed, you have two choices. Choice number one is like unemployment in our country. You collect every week a check, a good bit less than what you would have otherwise earned, but enough to get you through, and you get it for somewhere between 6 and 18 months, depending on the specifics. But you have a choice. You don't have to do that. You can instead go to the government and say, I don't want to get a check every week for whatever the time is. I want the entire amount given to me right now as a lump sum. The government in Italy says, we will give you that lump sum on two conditions. Number one, you get at least 9 other unemployed Italians to go in on this with you. And number two, you use the bulk of this lump sum to start a worker cooperative business. If you fail, you will not be eligible for unemployment compensation because we're basically giving it to you now. The government won't therefore have to spend any more money than they probably would have otherwise. But here comes the difference. All of those workers will not be unemployed. They'll be working, and they'll be working hard, because their future depends on their success as a collective group of people making that enterprise work, because they all know what situation they'll be in if it doesn't work. Footnote: Italy has a greater sector of the economy organized as worker co-ops than any other country in Europe. No surprise there. Why do I recommend it? Number one, unemployed people, that's a dead weight loss for society. The unemployed continue to consume, but they don't produce. They don't add to the store of social wealth. They just pull away from it. It is an irrationality of capitalism to ever let that exist. And by creating a worker co-op sector, you put people to work, producing something useful for society, because that's the condition for their worker co-op to succeed. Number two, you don't have the bad feeling, the loss of income, the loss of self-esteem that goes with unemployment. I hope people know that all of the indices of social distress, alcoholism, drug abuse, family violence, you name it, it goes up when unemployment goes up. So we are saving vast amounts of people's lives, energies, emotions, stability, mental health, and all of the money otherwise needed to treat those problems. And now finally, number three, if the workers together make the decisions about enterprises, they are not going to take chances with their own health. We are suffering a disaster now because a very small part of our population, the class of employers, has a conflict. They want businesses to be open because that's where their profit lies. Because they are at the top of the heap economically, they can take the steps, in most cases, to guard their health. They want the mass of people who don't have those resources and who don't depend on profits to come to work for no more than their wages and thereby risk their lives with this virus. This is impossible. The decisions of an enterprise, sure, they can include profit. That's one of the things you're in business for, but you're also in business, as in the rest of your life, committed to keeping your family safe from infectious disease, well-fed, have a decent work-life balance, and so on. Since the decisions of our corporate capitalism are made by a tiny minority, the board of directors, the owner, for the vast majority, we shouldn't be surprised that the little minority takes care of what it needs and what it wants and serves itself, and it doesn't serve the mass of people. And the coronavirus pressure to go back to work is the proof positive of the horror that that situation makes possible. So I would say, let's put huge numbers of the unemployed back to work, either under the government following the Great Depression model, or even better, organized into a worker co-op sector in which the people making the decisions will be naturally making them not just about the profit of their enterprise, but just as important, if not more so, the public health of themselves, their spouses, their children, and the communities in which they live. It'll be a better economic system for the majority of people. It'll only be a loss for the tiny people at the top. They've had their dominance for 300 years of capitalism. Their failure to prepare for this virus, to cope with this virus, to now manage the 35 million people, their failed preparation threw out of work, it's about time.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And I think really quick, I wanted to touch on something. I think it's an important thing that we don't talk about. We always claim to live in a democracy, and Republicans like to say the freest democracy. But really quick, I just wanted to touch on it. I think the idea that we live in a democracy is interesting when you also think about the aspect that when you think about it, where do you spend most of your adult life? In your workplace, producing capital for the capital owners, etc. Using your capital, your labor power, your body, etc. to create profit for somebody else. And it's interesting that the place that we spend most of our adult life, we have the least say. We have the least democracy in where we spend most of our life. So I thought that was just something to leave you with.
And that's pretty much our bottom line too. If there's not democracy in the workplace, it's not going to translate anywhere else.
Exactly. If we can't even get democracy in the place that is probably most important to the creation of a society, like just if you can't have democracy in where things are produced, how are you going to have democracy at the top? And how is that going to translate to? And how is that going to translate to helping those at the bottom? If anybody else has anything to add.
Well, I do have one more part from this clip to show.
Yeah, go ahead, bring it up. Let's keep going.
Call ourselves a democracy. I'm going to take Americans at their word in general, that when they say they are pro-democracy with a little d, with the idea of democracy, and again, that idea is if you are affected by a decision, you have the right to participate equally in making that decision. So we do that. We let the mayor make a decision, but we all have one vote over who's the mayor, and ditto the congressperson or the senator or the president or anybody else like that. We allow us to have some real power over them, not just them over us.
Created by Republicans, by the way.
Well, but the minute you enter the workplace, you cross the threshold into the office or the store or the factory, all of that democracy is immediately abolished. You have a tiny group of people at the top, the owner of the business or the major shareholders or the board of directors that are picked by the major shareholders. They have all the power. They tell you where to go, where to sit, where to stand, what machine to use, in what way, on what raw materials. They decide every single detail. Literally, how many minutes you can spend in a bathroom is determined by these same people. And at the end of the day, whatever your brains and muscles have helped to produce belongs instantaneously to the employer, not to you who've actually made the thing or performed the service. All right, this is extraordinary. What votes do you have over the behavior of the owner of your enterprise? Answer, none. What power do you have over the board of directors in the corporation where you work? None. You don't elect the board. You don't govern the board. You have no veto power over the board. Nothing. You know what you can do? You can quit. And when you quit, you can go to work for another employer, and you will be right back in the same exact situation. Now, here's the punchline. If you spend your life as an adult in the United States, that means you're spending 5 out of 7 days, the best hours of the day, at work in this undemocratic economic universe. You know something? You're not going to have the time, the interest, or the behavior to demand in the political sphere what you don't have in your economic life.
Yeah.
In other words, to say it in academic language, the failure of a democratic economic system undermines whatever political democracy you have. And what we have here in the United States is we have this sham, this thing where once a year we go into some booth and make a vote. Meanwhile, we allow economic inequality on the job. You're never allowed to have any power on the job. You lose interest in the whole business. You don't pay attention. Half of Americans don't vote normally. And you allow the wealth to buy the politicians, to buy the media, So yeah, you have the one person, one vote, but the dominant political messaging is in the hands of the people at the top. The inequality, the lack of democracy in the economy has basically undermined democracy in politics. So if you reestablish it, if you really do give democracy a place in the workplace, in the enterprise, by setting up worker co-ops, you will not only bring democracy to the workplace where it should have been all along and never was, but you're also striking a real blow to make democracy politically real instead of merely formal.
Yeah, I mean, you can't say it better.
I think the best way I could summarize kind of what he all just said is that is what the whole union movement of the 30s should have become.
Right, what it should have coalesced to at some point.
It's actually interesting. On my lunch today, while I was at work, I was watching this video so I can have something to say about it. And one of my coworkers overheard me, and he asked like what I was watching. I explained it, and then we kind of started, just talking the job about it. And he was just kind of saying like, oh, like I think worker co-op's like a cool idea, but I don't think they'll ever work here in the United States. And I was like, oh, why do you think that? And he was basically just people are like naturally greedy kind of thing, not taking into account that all we see from employers is just greed, because that's like the whole point of an employer.
Right.
And that's the whole point of capitalism, is to just
and especially here,
create profit.
Like Wolff brings up, like literally in Italy, they do this shit.
No, yeah, and then he asked me like if there are any like notable like worker co-ops, and I brought up Madrigon in Spain. If you guys don't know what that is, it's Madrigon is like what is like, I believe, if I can.
I think they are the biggest.
I think they are the biggest worker co-op, and they're like very competitive with the typical employer-employee structure, and
yeah, I mean they turn a profit.
And I think what was interesting about that conversation is kind of like how understanding they were just like from the get-go, and then it kind of, I don't want to say devolved, but it turned into more of like just kind of like the normal things you hear when you like, if you don't like something, you can go somewhere else. And like how we just brought up, it's like we were talking about like wages and stuff, and I was saying how like because we were at work, I was at Whole Foods. I was saying like how our boss Jeff Bezos only raised their wages after legislation was passed, and
Bernie was gonna make it pay for food stamps.
It was a weird take, because he kind of like from there he was just like, well, like like he brought up the whole like started in his basement thing, and he was just like, if you don't like, the cool thing about it is if you don't like where you work, you can just quit and go work somewhere else.
And that's kind of equally no say in the same place.
And not only that, it's just, that's kind of a made up. That's a made up thing, because most Americans, they're glued to their job, whether that be
especially now.
Especially now, but
with
normally,
Corona,
whether that be from like being tied to healthcare, like needing that job because it provides healthcare to your whole family, or just lack of job security in their region, like places like the Deep South and the Rust Belt. Like once you get a job, you don't want to quit, because fucking what happens if you can't find another job? You're fucked. You're screwed. Your children, not only you're gonna starve, but your children are gonna starve, etc. So like this idea that you can just whenever you want quit and go somewhere else is mostly false. I mean, if you're in a comfortable situation, if you come from just more wealth than the average American, you might be able to quit your job and go work somewhere else. You might be able to not work until you find a place that has exactly what you want. But for the overwhelming majority of Americans, that's not it. Like you get your job at Walmart, you work that job at Walmart, you go find a job at like an Applebee's, and you work both of those jobs just to make your rent. Then in some cases, you have fucking mothers of children that they're raising while also working 2 and in some cases 3 jobs just to make the random bills. That's it. Just to survive, people are having to overwork themselves, working insane hours. And it's crazy that we're even having this conversation at this point about like capitalism in general, but also having this conversation about like minimum wage, stuff like that, rent control, like the fact that there's even like, I mean, most of the debate comes from lobbyists, but the fact that there's even debate, period, is just ridiculous. When you have the bottom doing so terribly and the top doing so well, you have to at one point realize the imbalance is coming from somewhere, and it's definitely from the top. That's pretty much what I had to say.
Do you have any closing thoughts, Carlos, before we move on?
I did, but I forgot them. So.
Yeah. Let's move into our our climate segment then.
Yeah, this was like one of the cooler parts that I'm gonna let Jacan and Carlos take over here because they brought most of these links to the table.
Yeah, but feel free, anyone jump in, obviously. We're gonna start with the oil spill that it only was recent news, I guess, but because it didn't happen recently. The spill itself did, but the cause, kind of like Lebanon was underlying. It's been going on. I'll read from the top. It's title on the top down. Mauritius scrambles to counter oil spill from grounded ship. Anxious residents of Mauritius created makeshift oil spill barriers on Saturday as tons of fuel leaking from a grounded ship put endangered wildlife in further jeopardy. Past that one, the Indian Ocean nation has declared an environmental emergency, and France said it was sending help from the nearby island of Reunion. When biodiversity is imperiled, there's urgency to act, French President Emmanuel Macron said on Saturday. Keep that statement in mind as we move on. Let's move down to the point when it says residents and environmentalists alike. Residents and environmentalists alike wondered why authorities didn't act more quickly after the ship ran aground on a reef on July 25th. Mauritius says the ship, the MV Wakashio, was carrying nearly 4,000 tons of fuel. That's the big question, John Hughes Gardine says of the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation, told the Associated Press. Why that ship has been sitting for long and that coral reef, and nothing has been done. He said it was the country's first oil spill, and perhaps no one expected the ship to break apart. For days, residents peered out at the precariously tilted boat as a salvage team arrived and began work. But ocean waves kept battering it. They just hit and hit and hit, Mr. Gardine said. Cracks in the hull were detected a few days ago, and the salvage team quickly left the scene. About 400 booms used basically barrels used to contain oil on sea surface were sent, but they were not enough. Mauritian Prime Minister Praveen Jagal, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, says the spill represents a danger for the country of 1.3 million people, which relies heavy on tourism and has been hit hard by the pandemic. Our country doesn't have the skills and expertise to refloat stranded ships, he said on Friday. Bad weather had made further action impossible, he said. I worry what could happen Sunday when the weather deteriorates. Heavy wind is expected to push the oil slick farther along the mainland shore. Mauritius Meteorological Service's forecast for Sunday, last Sunday, advised that seas would be rough with swells beyond the reefs and ventures in the open seas not advised. So really the two quotes I feel like need to be kept in mind here are from French President Emmanuel Macron, who was saying, when biodiversity is in peril, there's urgency to act. Although, it has been a month.
Absolutely zero urgency.
Yeah, or any action until way too late. And then coming from, the Prime Minister, our country doesn't have the skills and expertise to refloat stranded ships, which is most likely true, but a country that does, that, controlled Mauritius and many of the islands around it and has, tens of trillions of dollars and is able to do something is the French government and Emmanuel Macron, who could have, when the ship was grounded, actually done something about it. And yeah, it's just disgusting to see because Macron's kind of been this, one of the liberal figures in France. Obviously, there's been the long ongoing Yellow Vest protests against him, but he's really shown like kind of what would have happened maybe if someone like Hillary had won our election in 2016.
Yeah, just that basic liberalism ideology.
Yeah, he's
not change up anything, still conform to the same capitalist ideology.
Well, they were ground zero for the Paris Climate Accord, which is of course is better than what we're doing now, and Trump backed out of that,
but still doesn't go far enough.
Yeah,
talking
and
about how
obviously
we're
was
climate change.
It obviously was coming out of one side of their mouth and something out the other, because they say that, but then in incidents like this where they can actually make a change and save biodiversity, they do nothing. So.
Yeah, they do absolutely nothing until it's literally too late.
Yeah, it's too late, and they can mitigate the damage now, but there's already oil in the water. It is what it is.
Exactly.
So yeah, horrible news. We can move on to the next thing we have in this climate piece. Some more bad news. Let me go ahead and pull this one up.
And this is where things start to get a little dark.
Yeah, so Canadian ice shelf area bigger than Manhattan collapses due to rising temperatures. Last fully intact ice shelf in the Canadian Arctic lost more than 40% of its area in 2 days at the end of July. The Milne ice shelf is at the fringe of Ellesmere Island in the sparsely populated northern Canadian territory of Nunavut. Above normal air temperatures, offshore winds, and open water in front of the ice shelf are all part of the recipe for ice shelf breakup. The Canadian Ice Services said in a tweet earlier this week, entire cities are that size. These are big pieces of ice, said Luke Copland, a glaciologist at the University of Ottawa, who is part of the research team studying the Milne ice shelf. The shelf's area shrank from about 80 square kilometers. By comparison, the island of Manhattan in New York covers roughly 60 square kilometers. So it's bigger than Manhattan, and it shrunk. And it was the last fully intact one also, horribly. This was the largest remaining intact ice shelf, and it's disintegrated, basically, Copland said. The Arctic has been warming at twice the global rate for the last 30 years, due to a process known as Arctic amplification. But this year, temperatures in the polar region have been intense. The polar sea ice hits its lowest extent for July in 40 years. Record heat and wildfires have scorched Siberian Russia. Summer in the Canadian Arctic this year, in particular, has been 5 degrees Celsius above the 30-year average, Copland said. That has threatened smaller ice caps, which can melt quickly because they do not have the bulk that larger glaciers have to stay cold. As a glacier disappears, more bedrock is exposed, which then heats up and accelerates the melting process. Skipping that paragraph, the ice shelf collapse on Ellesmere Island also meant the loss of the Northern Hemisphere's last known epichelf lake, a geographic feature in which a body of fresh water is dammed by the ice shelf and floats atop ocean water, which, maybe in future hindsight, we really need access to fresh water as we, further aerify like places like the Middle East. Mm-hmm. And now, one of the last known one in the Northern Hemisphere that's captured in a glacier, just boop, gone. Skipping a couple more, I found this quote pretty stark. Ellesmere also lost 2 Patrick Bay ice caps this summer. We saw them going, like someone with terminal cancer. It was only a matter of time, said Mark Cerezi, director of the National Snow and Ice Data Center. That's putting it as unlikely as possible. We saw them going, referring to the ice caps, like someone with terminal cancer.
Watching your life force be drained from you.
That's what's happening to our planet. And
if you remember from the top of the article, it lost 40% of its mass in 2 days at the end of July.
Yeah,
insane to think about. This huge 80 square kilometers, and 40% of it took 2 days. And
Yeah, just New
gone.
York dropping into the, or Manhattan rather, dropping into the
That literally, yeah.
ocean.
That had to cause like flooding issues.
Yeah, exactly, and all kinds of stuff. Because they're saying there's also the fresh water that was in it too. So not to mention what it messes up in the cycle
and just messing up like the wildlife, because saltwater creatures when you put them in freshwater.
Or the rising water for the polar bears, can't cross those different caps.
Continuing to push them towards the equator.
So obviously all this is very bad news, and the planet we're watching it die in front of our eyes. But Carlos has something that maybe we can smile a little bit about.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That, we can't put all our hope on one thing, but, out of all the solutions I've seen for different ways we can tackle climate change, this is probably the biggest one. And I don't think I've heard anyone really talk about it,
Yeah.
I literally doesn't get any coverage.
I literally did not know about this until Carlos.
Until this segment.
Yeah. So this is pretty interesting stuff. Carlos, if you want to take it, go ahead.
So, as the title reads, turning the tide on climate change with green sand beaches, capturing a trillion tons of excess CO2 in rock using the power of natural wave energy. So, the nature-based, permanent, scalable, and affordable solution to climate change. Nature has shown us how this sand can help save the planet. Weathering is the Earth's natural CO2 removal process. So, I'm going to kind of start summarizing because it goes on here. And basically, as the picture kind of shows, you have natural volcanic rock, and the main mineral that this whole process involves, olivine, that gets weathered down by rain naturally and gets kind of washed down into the sediment of the earth. And as this process happens, the CO2 gets captured and it gets stored naturally into the ground.
Right, it becomes like limestone, etc. in the ground, right?
And that CO2 comes from the atmosphere. As rising CO2 levels increase, there's a lot more CO2 in the atmosphere being dissolved into the water. So this olivine material picks up the carbon as it merges with the water and creates like a material that sinks. And it's pretty much the best way to try to lower our amount of CO2 in the atmosphere,
as well as the oceans too.
And what's interesting about this, it's going to explain as we continue to go further, but it's interesting how not only detailed they are in this, but how interesting of
this is.
Yeah, how it's not only scalable, but how interesting of an idea this is, and can be so effective. And they're gonna get into the price here soon. Wait until you hear about how cost effective this is, and we'll go into that right now.
So
maybe we should touch on the this section here.
So it doesn't actually say it in here, but from what I've read, they estimate that in order to get our carbon emission levels neutral, so that our parts per million amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere doesn't continue to increase, we're not lowering it, just to neutralize it, it would be about $500 billion a year.
Which is
in order to get all this deployed, get it's crushed up olivine that they spread on the beaches.
They're essentially making it into a sand, and then replacing sand, or using it as an alternative sand so that we can remove CO2 from the atmosphere.
And what's interesting is
here's the picture of how it works.
Yeah, it should be on screen, but hearing the price tag, $500 billion, when you're talking about like a nation's economy, that's nothing. And to put it into perspective, our last military budget increase, that big one that everybody made a fuss about, especially with the whole Nancy Pelosi ripping up the speech shit, that was a $750 billion increase to our military budget. So just roll that back and boom, we have a really incredible and scalable way to combat climate change. And it's just something to think about, and also one more thing to piss you off about, something to make you hate not only the Trump government, but the entire establishment just a little bit more.
And this group, Project Vesta, they're a nonprofit out of California. So
yep.
They definitely have a lot of scientists, who can vet this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and even if you click on the science tab, I mean, it goes through, there's so many different like scientific journals and articles that come up. And
you can see here on there, they have a whole question and answer page just that goes on.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess we can wrap it up, basic concept for people too. Like, yeah, the goal is, they said something like 2% of, what did they say? Like sea shores or beach areas that they would have to do this to. And they've even calculated, the amount of, fossil fuel energy it would take to extract all the olivine and get it to all the places.
So they estimate a net loss of about 5% on carbon emissions it would take to, have this process unfold, which is pretty much nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Because, that's a massive, gain in carbon being taken out of the atmosphere.
Yeah. Yeah, and
this is immediate. These are immediate results where,
right.
Like currently I'd say pretty much if you ask any general person, their best idea is, well, let's just plant a bunch of trees.
Right.
Which, that's not a bad idea, but, like most people would realize. Not taking into account
time to grow.
Yeah, and you also have to protect them too, because if a bad forest fire happens, it basically erases everything you just did.
Yeah, right. Well, this doesn't really have a weather component to it too, where we're going to get screwed.
And then go back to the top here, the CO2 that gets stored in the, down at the ocean floor, it stays there.
Yeah,
it's not going anywhere. The way it gets recycled is the tectonic plate process.
Mm-hmm.
And it eventually will end up probably more the mantle, but
yeah, and their idea is essentially just accelerating
long-term
this process, right?
Yeah, this is definitely a long-term strategy, but it doesn't take a long-term amount of time to get it going.
Exactly. We could bust this out so quick if we just fucking got to work.
And I think part of this whole new rollout with the Vesta thing too is they were actually testing it on beaches now too, right? They actually have their own test area they're doing it.
Yeah.
And they have like a GPS overview of a controlled beach in their own, and it's like, yeah, the evidence, it's obvious, like the erosion, Go ahead, Michael.
I was about to ask if it was in effect or in its testing area, because it seems very in depth, and I see that there's a lot of research being put into it. So I was just wondering if it's probably in effect, of course, in a smaller scale. Of course, it's not in scale right now.
But even their idea to do it, 2% of global shores and beaches is nothing to get this done too. It's not like we have to change every beach to olivine too.
Yeah,
we
sure could though.
Yeah, and something like this needs to get talked about and implemented into obviously a wider plan to combat climate change.
But it definitely needs insane amount of media coverage. We need to get this.
Yeah, it's awesome.
To the forefront of what we're talking about.
Too. Yeah, heard about it. Yeah.
It was kind of a crazy topic and something I literally did not know about until Carlos brought it up.
Yeah.
So another shout out to Carlos.
Yeah, I heard about it from a Graham Elwood segment he did on
nice.
So
nice.
anyone want to look him up, he's definitely a great person to watch.
Yeah, funny too. He's very funny.
Also out of California.
And on that plug, we're going to go into our final break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about international politics. And then after that, we'll be doing a quick outro and send you guys on your way. To go on into this break, we have a song by SirRealist. It is called "The Light." There's a light that never goes out. If you want to check out more of his music and his personal Instagram, it is SirRealist805, SirRealist805. So yeah, get the song going, get the cameras cut, and we'll be back after a quick break and talk about international.
Thank you so much for staying with us.
Everybody, thank you for watching. Thank you for staying with us. We'll be right back.
That look upon your face that catches me every time. You need me there, then I'm dipping at the drop of a dime. And I'm just working on my craft, so I'm committing the time. And if you really need it, lovely, I'm committing a crime. You my best friend, teacher, and confidant, cause you really pay attention to these songs I be on. I look over and you're smiling, so I know that it's on. It's crazy cause you make me feel right even though when I'm wrong. And I can keep it going, make the sentence run on. And if I ever leave your life, just know you meant to be strong. It's that 27 club, I plan to be there in a couple years. Up in heaven drinking beers with a couple peers. Just know I'm smiling on you from the clouds. So when you look up, make sure you look at them how you look at me now. I look out for you without a doubt, cause there's this light inside of you I know could never go out.
If a double-decker bus seems to kill the both of us, yeah, I'd be cool with it. I swear that I'd be cool with it. Yeah. If a double-decker bus seems to kill the both of us, at least I die by your side. Die by your side. Yeah. There is a light and it never goes out. There is a light and it never goes out. No, it never goes out. No, it never goes out. If a double-decker bus seems to kill the both of us, yeah, I'd be cool with it. I swear that I'd be cool with it. Yeah. If a double-decker bus seems to kill the both of us, at least I die by your side. Die by your side. Yeah. There is a light and it never goes out. There is a light and it never goes out. No, it never goes out. No, it never goes out.
What's up? What's up? What's up? We're back.
We're back. We'll give you a minute to
come back. Those who are just coming back, we'll give you a second. Get your waters, etc., etc. We're gonna hop back into it here very soon.
All right.
Hello, hello.
What if we replaced all of our like kitty sandboxes, like kitten sandboxes, with olivine? Would it work?
Just fucking huge ass rocks of limestone.
You just gotta go jump it in the ocean. Yeah.
You think it would, right?
Yeah.
Maybe if you put it on like a big open patch, you know, and you don't have, you just have dirt underneath it, you know, maybe.
Yeah.
Wait till it rains or something.
But start doing all kinds of shit with it, you know.
If you have an outdoor cat, yeah, just like a little
I mean,
small part.
that's something like at the local level, you know. A lot you could you could like petition it at your city level, because this stuff is. I guess I'll add this last note, but it's incredibly cheap because I think the only real uses it has are jewelry and like uses in a blast furnace. So.
And what's interesting,
not a ton of demand.
Really quick before we transition to international, from a capitalist perspective, getting an early hold on the market for like green technologies is a smart business move. Like, obviously we want to move past capitalism, but looking at this from a capitalist angle, being one of the first companies to clean up the beaches and start collecting CO2 from the atmosphere, the amount of political clout you'll get in the media as well, like you'll skyrocket in fame. Obviously, in the capitalist angle, profit starts to become a motive. Battling the oil industry becomes a motive, or even siding with them. But just something to throw out there, something to think about. It's always interesting to think about it from other perspectives, especially ones that you don't necessarily agree with. So yeah, Jacan, do you want to take us into our first topic, talking international? This is technically
international well. and an anniversary, I guess. Yeah. I'll go ahead and intro, and then we'll have Carlos read from an article we have, and then talk on a book, because this is pretty important. We just passed the 75th anniversary of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. That is the United States dropping the only 2 nuclear bombs to ever be dropped on a civilian population, other than, of course, the Marshall Islands, which we also did. Yeah, that anniversary just recently passed, so I think it's important for us, 75 years deep, to reflect on, one of the worst war crimes in human history, and maybe a couple of different angles on, how it was. And yeah, well, Carlos, you want to go ahead and bring up that article? Talk about it. Right. That's always their steel man argument, right? The best thing they got.
Also, it's just a completely unproven fact that is always talked about is they always say, like, oh, the Japanese would have never given up. That's something that holds no actual weight. With
even something I had learned in a it might be true, but something that I had learned in a foreign policy class is that usually between these massive bombing raids, they would wait post 3 days to see for a declaration of surrender, right? Between Hiroshima and Nagasaki was 3 days. Exactly. So they didn't wait. They dropped it. That might have also been part of the strategy too, obviously, to be like, we're not even going to wait for a declaration of surrender between the 2 bombs.
We'll just
looking back at memos, their plan was, we'll drop the first one, and if they don't surrender in enough time, we'll drop the second one, even though we don't want to. But obviously the reality is we dropped them, within 3 days of each other, and devastated 2 cities.
And and the 3 days thing is 3 days between a normal bombing is different than 3 days between a nuclear bomb.
Bombing? Yeah,
completely different.
As we'll bring up from the book I have, in the Nagasaki bombing, it took them 2 weeks just to remove the bodies that still existed.
Yeah,
from the province.
That weren't literally dust.
So that's just 2 weeks to remove bodies and figure out what the hell happened. Carl, you want to go to the article though?
Here. There's a section I want to read from.
Yeah.
Down at the bottom. And you see it's very long.
Yeah, it's in an interview style format. Yeah, kind of.
Where was it? Okay. So, I'm going to start reading here. And the other thing is that for years, they did these nuclear war studies about limited nuclear war. Okay, so we drop one on the Russians, and they drop one on us, and then we negotiate. But study after study found it impossible to reach an endpoint, that these limited nuclear war scenarios don't work in war games, and that we've tried to conduct, that they almost always go completely out of control and to complete nuclear war. So yeah, it just becomes increasingly untenable to maintain these nuclear weapons. As much
Sorry, but yeah, just as a response to that, I mean, the only reason that didn't happen to us is because, we were the only ones with nuclear bombs at the time. Yeah.
As much as there's a nuclear arms race between the United States and Russia, to a much lesser extent, apparently, China. There's been studies, according to Wilkerson as well, about how many nuclear weapons are really needed to defend the United States. And it's like thousands less than there are. What do we know about what the Chinese are doing? The Chinese approach makes much more sense. First of all, they've got a no first use policy, which means they would never use nuclear weapons to initiate a war. Right now, Russia and the United States have about 93% of the world's nuclear weapons. China has had a very different approach. They've got about 300. Whereas we have maybe 7,000. They have 300. What they understand is that 300 is as effective as 7,000 as a deterrent.
Shit.
It's just, you think it's funny to think where you're gonna get to use even a quarter of those. If nuclear war breaks out,
you use like 50. Yeah.
You send your first wave, and then that's it. World's over. Like, you're not gonna use 7,000 fucking nukes.
So yeah, that's pretty much all I had from that. I think that was the most important part.
Yeah. I mean,
So even the argument that it's building these stockpiles are a good deterrent is
you don't need that many. We don't need any at all. But we definitely don't need 7,000.
Yeah. To jump from the article, I guess it's our book for the show today. I just picked it up, so I'm not too far. I'm maybe like 30 pages deep. But it's from the foreword. The book is called Children of the Atomic Bomb. It's a memoir from pediatrician James N. Yamazaki. He actually went to Nagasaki and Hiroshima post the bombings and studied the effects of the bombings on children. And as you imagine, what he found is awful. But one of the good passages I found here in the foreword early is subsequently posted in Nagasaki. He's talking about Dr. Yamazaki. Apparently, as a kind of exile for protesting such racist policies in Hiroshima, Dr. Yamazaki embarked on research concerning the medical effects of the atomic bomb without ever being informed of the existence of earlier U.S. scientific reports of this subject. So he was actually sent by the U.S. government to study the effects on the population. And he was told about none of the tests that had already been done that we knew of what radiation did. So he's going there completely blind. Another part of his own personal story too that you hear later on is he's doing this for the U.S. Meanwhile, his parents are in internment camps, concentration camps in California. Disgusting, of course. Here's something I didn't know, though. In the United States, there has emerged an almost pathological aversion to confronting what actually took place beneath the mushroom clouds. In the phrasing of a Senate resolution of September 1994 condemning the attempt of the Smithsonian Institution to present an exhibition emphasizing the human toll in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the bombs are said to have helped bring World War II to a merciful end. And then another thing I have tabbed in here. Yeah. It just even if that was their argument, it's ridiculous to think that they wouldn't even let the Smithsonian, have an exhibition that emphasizes the deaths that it caused. Further on, though, for many survivors of the bomb, the curtain never has closed on the so-called last act of the war, and never will. Dr. Yamazaki notes and calls attention to 9 different forms of cancer caused by radiation exposure from the bomb.
Jesus.
Most of these that affect children. Let's see if I can bring up the last little quote I have here. Actually, earlier. Now there it is. Yeah. When he actually visited Japan later in 1989, when Dr. James Yamazaki visited Japan in 1989, he attended a meeting of mothers in Hiroshima who were parents of Pika babies. Pika is a familiar euphemism to most Japanese, referring to the blinding flash of the atomic bomb and conveying a vivid sense of thermal burns and radiation poisoning. The Pika babies were children with abnormalities including mental retardation, malformed effects, etc. So yeah, and one of the things that so far I've seen that it goes on is that obviously we know the effects that it caused the population during the radiation effects, but one of the things that did worse to children, or most of the children, was those that were unborn. Most of the unborn, are those Pika babies that are 40, 50 years post the war, have these effects, kind of like the children in
Vietnam.
From
I was just about to bring that up. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I'm sure there's numerous other examples too, but yeah, it shows that our weapons of destruction, they obviously, it's not a 5-10 year damage.
They have more than the intended effect. The intended effect is obviously
generations.
Yeah, they don't. Nobody. They probably did. But publicly, they never took into account what this would do to generations after.
Yeah, when the war is over. But we can move on from this. But yeah, go if you can, check out this book, Children of the Atomic Bomb. It was actually released on the 50th anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, so it's interesting we bring it up for the 75th.
Mm-hmm.
Not much has changed in public opinion, I feel, but we'll see. So what's our next one here?
We're going to be talking about Bolivia, yeah.
Okay, I'll go ahead and read some of that one, and then we'll open it to discussion. The headline here: Bolivia's regime mobilizes far-right paramilitary groups. Paramilitary and extremist groups have waged assaults on demonstrators in 3 regions as security forces look the other way on day 7 of nationwide protests demanding elections. As you know, and as we covered earlier, they've delayed the elections because of coronavirus, but that's not true.
In reality, it's just to keep this fucking fascist regime in power.
Yeah, this coup. Human rights defenders are warning about the use of civil shock groups and paramilitaries linked to Bolivia's coup regime, which is, of course, linked to us, to violently attack the road blockades while leaving people injured. Bolivia's Obumasan Nadia Cruz has reported to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, as well as to the UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet, that Bolivia's police has turned to irregular civilian groups with a para-police and paramilitary character to lift the blockades being carried out as organized working-class sectors intensify their resistance to the coup. The Ombudsman denounced that one of these groups was present on Saturday night at Plaza Avaroa in the city of La Paz, where youth are holding a hunger strike and vigil outside of the Supreme Electoral Court. Under the threats of force, the shot group demanded that the citizens end their protests while police stood by idle. Sounds very familiar to our own situation in some ways. The protesters say they are vulnerable to an escalation of attacks, as media workers are now also afraid to cover the events due to intimidation by violent groups. The Association for Human Rights of Bolivia has called on international organizations to pronounce themselves on these violations. It also reported that a journalist of the television channel Cadena A was assaulted while trying to film the far-right group intimidating youth and student protesters. Across the country, 61 rural workers were arrested on Saturday afternoon in the municipality of Samaipata in the department of Santa Cruz after an ambush by paramilitary groups of the far-right Samaipata Civic Committee in joint actions with the police. A number of those who were detained and released report torture and maltreatment and said the police planted explosives within the belongings of the arrested in order to accuse them of carrying such devices.
Jesus.
Around 40 of them are currently still being held as political prisoners, some of which have been framed as carrying explosives. We can stop there, and can we actually bring up the video of some of these working class indigenous people marching? It says here, could you open it back so we could just read the little caption they have here? Bolivians marched today against the U.S.-backed regime past the Huilani Bridge, Sacaba, where the regime massacred anti-coup protesters on November 15th, 2019. So yeah, when the coup had last taken place, they had actually killed people, indigenous, working class protesters here. And as we'll play, they're here marching again.
And something to keep in mind for those who don't know much about Bolivia, like a good majority of the population are indigenous people.
Right, and they finally had democratic control of the government until, we got our...
Through Evo Morales and the MAS.
For those of you in audio only, I guess, it's just an insane amount of people. They're all dressed in their traditional indigenous regalia. They have the indigenous Bolivian flag carried along with them.
They also have the now internationally known Bolivian flag with them as well. And just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people.
Yeah, and it's beautiful too to see this kind of resistance in a time like this.
And also being as diligent as they are, wearing masks for those. Lots of masks.
Right. Yeah, it actually seems like they've done pretty well.
And it's just it's very good. It's very good, and also it gives you hope that no matter where
they're standing up.
No matter where fascism appears, not only just the left, but those who oppose fascism, will always rise, and we'll take them down. And it's good to see, and it gives you hope for the future of leftist politics, and also just the continuation of our society.
Moving quick from Bolivia, another place that the U.S., along with Saudi Arabia, has shit on and continued an ongoing genocide of the Yemeni people. Let's bring up the Reuters article. I'll go ahead and bring it up to you real quick. The headline here: Women of southern Yemen port remember better times. Skipping the intro paragraph. That was 2 decades ago. Afrodal Said, she lived in what was the Socialist People's Democratic Republic of Yemen. Many women's rights guaranteed by that southern state have been chipped away since it merged with the more conservative tribal north in 1990. It was such a beautiful time. Now I mostly stay at home. If I go out, I have to cover my hair and dress in an abaya, said a journalist. A journalist said, tugging angrily at her shapeless black robe. Some Adeni men also lament the post-unification erosion of women's rights in Yemen's once socially liberal south, where people say the Sana'a government treats them unfairly in a host of ways, including property disputes, jobs, and pension rights. If we can go farther down to where the bold is for, it says regression. Southern secessionism represents a potent threat for Salah, already struggling with a Shiite revolt in the north and a resurgent al-Qaeda network which drew world attention after it said it was behind a failed December 25th attack on a U.S. airliner. Salah forged North-South unity in 1990. But 4 years later, a southern breakaway was crushed by government forces stifled by Islamist militants who had once fought in Afghanistan. Keep in mind, these Islamist militants who had once fought in Afghanistan, that's Saudi Arabia funded, baby. And that's the reason why southern Yemen, who was once a socialist, People's Republic, slowly the north that was influenced by Saudi Arabia, they've regressed into this Wahhabist, Saudi Arabia society. And not only that, but Saudi Arabia, with the whole southern part, the part that resisted, is now doing an ongoing genocide. Mostly funded by us too. We make their bombs.
To put it very lightly, they're literally glassing cities, villages,
bombing school buses of children.
Exactly, and
famously,
to not use such vulgar language, but glassing villages.
To go down to the where it says Saudi influence, we'll just touch on that a little bit. And this is why I wanted to bring it up, because although, we obviously know the current history of Yemen being, the massacre that's going on there, as well as, not that long ago where Trump vetoed, one of his only vetoes, vetoed the War Power Act and said we won't end in any way our support for this genocide. Here from the article, Saudi influence, Aden, whose port had its heyday during British rule, has always been more outward-looking than the rest of Yemen. In the socialist era, the city had women prosecutors, judges, and senior government officials. Many women studied in the Soviet Union. Since unity, Islam has made a deeper mark in Aden. Mosques have sprung up on almost every street, while other buildings decay in a city neglected for years. It goes on, but the point is, to people that say this kind of, socialist society isn't possible in places like the Middle East. We'll have another example after this too, but look at Yemen, man. They were showing, progression for women in their society. They were trying to socialize their means of production, and they've seen nothing but regression from, a U.S. abetted state. And it's really sad to see. But it's also, because obviously most people don't know socialist southern Yemen, it's good to see that it's possible to change.
Yeah. And and with having such deep roots, when given a chance, the transition back will kind of almost seem natural for a lot of people.
And as it says in the article, they want that. A lot of the people, marvel at the heyday. They liked having more rights.
And one of the most important things to take away living in the United States is we are very responsible for what's going on, and we have a lot of power to change what's going on.
Right.
If we actually had
the most power.
Yeah, if we actually had leaders that literally cared about this democracy that they all claim to care about, they would immediately stop the funding. They would denounce what Saudi Arabia is doing. They would do everything they can to help southern Yemen and to bring back the real democracy, what southern Yemen had planned and could even have spread to northern Yemen, unifying the country and bringing a better, more socialistic lifestyle to the people, less alienation from things like their labor and their communities, and less of this oppressive theocratic government, and just truly bringing life back into these forgotten communities.
Yeah, and I guess that's a good segue for, I believe it's our last article for the night.
Yeah.
Stay with us if you're still here.
Thank you again, everybody who's still here, everybody who came earlier. We really appreciate it.
We're going to jump around a little bit in this article, so bear with us. It's really good, though. I'll read the headline first, and then we'll scroll to the bottom. Abdullah Öcalan, my solution for Turkey, Syria, and the Kurds. This is an op-ed by him. For over 2 decades, Kurdish leader Abdullah Öcalan has been held in the Turkish prison on Imrali Island. In this op-ed for Jacan, he calls for a democratic nation project able to unite citizens of different ethnic backgrounds and cultural traditions. Can we actually scroll to the bottom first because it gives a little summary on Abdullah further down on this? Yeah, right there. That little. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, right there, right above the slash. Let me get to it, and I'll read it. Abdullah Öcalan is the founder of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the PKK, regarded as one of the Kurds' most important political representatives and a leading strategist. Ever since his abduction from Kenya in 1999 and subsequent trial and death sentence commuted to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, he has been held in total isolation on Imrali Island for almost 11 years. For almost 11 years, he was the sole prisoner there. Then we can go back to the top where the article starts. I'll go ahead and read from there. And this first couple paragraphs are, to hear, I guess, a politician talk like this is mind blowing. Capitalist modernity is history's deadliest and most continuous crisis of civilization. In particular, the general destruction of the last 200 years has disrupted thousands of evolutionary links in the natural environment. We are probably not yet fully aware of the devastation this has caused the plant and animal worlds. It is, however, clear that, like the atmosphere, both these worlds are steadily emitting SOS signals. How long can humanity go on enduring this modernity, which has inflicted far-reaching environmental devastation and caused the disintegration of society? How will humanity soothe the pain and agony of war, unemployment, hunger, and poverty? The claim that the nation-state protects society is a vast illusion. On the contrary, society has been increasingly militarized by the nation-state and fully submerged in a kind of war. I call this war a society-side, imposed in 2 ways. First, power and the state apparatus control, oppress, and surveil society. Second, the information technology, the media monopolies, of the past 50 years has replaced real society with a virtual one. Up against the canons of nationalism, religionism, sexism, scientism, the arts, and the entertainment industry, including sports, soap operas, etc., with which society is being battered 24/7 by the media, how can society be defended? It's becoming quite clear that nation-statism in the Middle East is, in fact, one of capitalist modernity's tools of domination. What the Treaty of Versailles was to Europe, the Sykes-Picot Agreement drawn up between the British and the French in 1916, is to the Middle East a peace to end all peace. Today's nation-states have the same meaning in the region as the Roman Empire's governors once had. But they are even more collaborationist with capitalist modernity and stand even further from the region's cultural traditions. They are at war with their own peoples internally and with one another externally. The liquidation of traditional society means war against peoples, and maps drawn with a ruler are an invitation for wars between states. None of them are adequate to overcoming the deepening crisis. In fact, their existence, i.e. the nation states, further deepens this crisis. Let's go ahead and move down to the Fighting for the Future section. Yeah, we'll start actually one paragraph above from the Fighting for the Future section. The democratic nation solution proposed by the Kurds has enabled them to eliminate ISIS, the result of religious monism, on behalf of all humanity. This is no doubt the result of our paradigm based on women's freedom, making it a role model all over the world. Fighting for the future. At present, the developments in northern and eastern Syria have reached an important point. The recognition of the administration of North and East Syria and the local democracy it represents for the Arab, Kurdish, Armenian, Assyrian, and other peoples will be a very important development both for Syria and the wider Middle East. Our call for people to return from Europe, Turkey, and elsewhere will be possible once a democratic constitution of Syria is declared. Our view on the Kurdish-Turkish conflict that has gone on for nearly a century, is clear. We've been developing a democratic solution of the Kurdish question since 1993. Our stance, as seen in the 2013 talks with the Turkish nation-state held in Imrali, expressed in the Nuraz Declaration as we enter the dialogue process, is today more important than ever. We reinforce this stance in the 7-point declaration we put forth in 2019. We insist on the need for social reconciliation and a democratic negotiation to replace the culture of polarization and conflict. Nowadays, problems can be solved not with physical tools of violence, but with soft power. Under favorable conditions, I could set up the moves to eliminate the conflict within a week. As for the Turkish state, it is at a crossroads. It can either continue on its path towards unraveling like other nation-states in the region, or enter into a dignified peace and a meaningful democratic solution. Ultimately, everything will be determined by the struggle between the parties. The success of the struggle waged by the Kurds through the politics of peace and democratic politics shall determine the end result, and freedom shall prevail. Yeah, so obviously this dude's amazing and very gifted writer, but as he rightfully points out, like, the Kurds' approach to how they're doing things and creating this social, almost nationless state that they want for the rest of, Syria and Turkey wider, has enabled them to do things like virtually defeat ISIS, which is amazing because they actually can band together across, different lines and come together as, a people that are not fighting for one specific area or just their own cultural establishment.
It goes beyond borders.
Yeah, it's about, it's a humanitarian philosophy at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's amazing to see someone speak like that. And the Kurds are, one of the greatest, shining bastions of, democracy working.
Yeah.
And obviously we should point out, we've done, especially in recent history, everything to fuck over the Kurds. And it's undoubtedly in part because they are trying to do something like this. And just a side note before you guys take it, imagine Erdogan writing this, the leader of Turkey, who's a thuggish goon, like, unimaginable.
Yeah. And another thing to point out is just in recent history how we've portrayed the Kurds, and especially coming from right and conservative leaning figures, we've seen them as this evil militant, like very like hyper aggressive Marxist movement that is just like terrorizing the region almost. And they always bring up how they're just like how they're killing people,
Right.
leaving out the crucial piece of information that the people that they're killing is ISIS, and just defending themselves from Turkey's aggressive government coming to try to fucking neutralize them as well.
Right.
But just it's another piece of the US's importance in the region of the Middle East, and how we shape the narrative here at home, and how it affects everyone's, but mostly just like relatively uninformed people that stick to one or two of the mainstream media outlets, and and just how easy we feed them this information, and they're just like, oh, yep, this is how this goes. The Kurdish are slaughtering people. It must be bad, even though we don't take into account
Let's not listen to their leaders and
let's not look at who they're actually killing. Let's make these clickbaity headlines, to leave people more uninformed than they would have originally been if they went and looked for this stuff themselves.
Before we get out of here, Michael or Carlos, do you want to add anything writ large or to the international view or anything? Michael, you good? Yeah. Okay, cool. I guess we're gonna be getting on out of here pretty soon.
Yeah. Really quick, I want to thank everybody who stuck by. It's 12:30 at night. We went on a little longer than we wanted to, but still, thank you to everybody who stayed.
Partly we got through everything.
Yeah, we got through everything. Our alerts are a little buggy, so if anybody dropped follows or anything like that, we really appreciate it.
Yeah.
We're gonna fix that as soon as we can. Get that into the next episode.
Yeah, it's
Wednesday.
It's gonna take a little.
Yeah, we're working through the kinks. It's only our second episode, but most importantly, you guys staying with us is super awesome, and it helps us. It really knowing that people are interested in this stuff, especially in our local area. It's super cool.
And as we go on, we're gonna cover more local stuff, obviously. And try to have some people on.
Yeah, so please stay with us, stay followed, keep supporting us. We're gonna return it to you guys. From Ruski, Jacan, and I, we thank everybody. Everybody, please enjoy your night, get good sleep, and let's wake up and keep punching up. Everybody, we're gonna take you guys out to another local artist. Again, if you're a local artist, if you know local artists, please DM us on our official Twitter at Spoop Podcast and send us your links. We'll get that set up and get you into an episode. So we're taking us out to the Slump Boys again. The song is called "What to Do." Let's get the cameras cut. Let's get the music going. Again, thank you everybody, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
Love you guys. Bye.
Love you guys.
Just another day and I'm ready to go. I'm swooping mo, so I hit him on his cellular phone. Papa's on for the homies and we slapping some bones. I'm getting love from these hoes even when I'm alone. 10 toes to the flow when I'm out of my coat. I see the hate show, you can say hello to the chrome. I fuck your bitch and I fuck your baby mama. You run it to your homies and they say that they don't even want the drama. So why proceed like it ain't no thing? Got these puppies backing down, they scared of guns that go bang. They say be tripping, then I'm tripping, fool. Mo tripping cause he tripping, Mackie tripping, shoe tripping, fool, so what it do?
Riding with a stick on my lap and it's loaded. These bitches showing love to the gang, yeah we know this. 501 on back, fuck the fence, keep it going. We got it on our own, keep it G, stay West Coastin'.
It's more licks and I'm sicker than the swine flu. You got some money, I suggest you don't show me do. Don't believe me, ask the homies, they'll tell you too. I keep a Nina on my waist and she love to shoot. And my lady so bad, had to play for keeps. She a real one and she always keep me on my feet. Call my daughter FaceTime, she my whole world. Knows her ABCs down, and I love you girl. Brush my teeth, water the grass, continue my routine. Walk them down, no range, I don't need no beam. Southside, Terrace Ave, and you know the team. Southside, Terrace Ave, and you know the team.
Riding with a stick on my lap and it's loaded. These bitches showing love to the gang, yeah we know this. 501 on back, fuck the fence, keep it going. We got it on our own, keep it G, stay West Coastin'.
Coming about the trenches of the ox where the monsters out to get ya. Always watch my back for these hoes trying to picture. Selling scriptures on wax out the trunk for my drifters that live for the funk and no die for that hitters. Wonder why I stay wet, sipping liquor at elixirs. SirRealist brought the bitches, more licks brought prescriptions. Numbed up, guns tucked, marks trying to run up. Better put up a shut up, sick dogs on the come up. South side to the east, believe we got it on lock. My clock broke at 4:20, so I'm blazing.